Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to kick off our presentation today with an overview of change sets. This is the first slide, so I want to warmly welcome you all and thank you for being here. Our focus will be on understanding what change sets are and how they work. We'll cover the basics, explore their purpose, and look at how they can be used effectively. So let's get started and dive into the world of change sets. Let's talk about change sets and how they help us move customizations between different Salesforce orgs. Essentially, change sets allow us to send modifications from one environment to another. For example, if you create and test a new object in a sandbox, you can then send that to your production org using a change set. It's a straightforward way to manage changes without manually recreating everything. Now, it's important to remember that change sets can only include modifications that you can make through the Setup menu. So, you can't use a change set to upload actual data, like contact records. They only contain metadata, such as configurations and customizations. Think of change sets as containers for your setup changes, not data. When you want to send these customizations, you create what's called an outbound change set. Once you send it, the other org receives it as an inbound change set, ready to be reviewed and deployed. But to do this, your orgs need to be connected via a deployment connection, and they must be affiliated with a production org, meaning either a production org and a sandbox, or two sandboxes created from the same production environment. This process ensures that your customizations are consistent across environments, which is key to maintaining a healthy, synchronized Salesforce setup. Now let's talk about when to use change sets, starting with simple UI-based deployments. These are ideal when you need to make straightforward changes that can be managed easily through the Salesforce user interface. It's a quick and efficient way to deploy updates without diving into complex processes. Next, we have declarative or small development changes. If your updates are mostly declarative, like configuring settings, creating new objects, or making minor tweaks, change sets are a great fit. They help you move these smaller, less complex modifications smoothly from one environment to another. It's also important to note that change sets work best when you're dealing with connected orgs only. That means both your source and target orgs should be part of the same Salesforce environment or connected environments, ensuring a seamless and secure transfer of your changes. So, in summary, you'll want to consider change sets for simple, declarative updates that are made through the UI, especially when working within connected organizations. They provide a straightforward way to manage and deploy these kinds of changes efficiently. Now, let's take a look at the two main types of change sets we work with. First, we have the outbound change set. This is created in the source organization, where you prepare the changes you want to move. Think of it as packaging up all the updates, configurations, or components you've made in your development or sandbox environment. Then, we have the inbound change set. This is what happens once the change set is received and deployed into the target organization, such as a production environment or a different sandbox. It's the actual transfer of those changes from one place to another. Understanding these two types is key because it helps us manage and track changes effectively across different environments. When you think about the overall deployment process, these change sets are essential tools for ensuring that updates are smoothly moved and correctly implemented. They help maintain consistency and reduce errors in your deployment workflows. Now, let's take a closer look at the supported and unsupported components when working with this platform. On the left side, we have the components that are supported, meaning you can customize and extend your org using these without issues. For example, custom objects and fields are supported, so you can create your own data structures tailored to your needs. Apex classes and triggers are also supported, allowing for complex automation and logic. Flows and workflows are supported too, making it easier to automate processes visually. And Lightning Web Components and Visualforce pages are supported, giving you the flexibility to build custom user interfaces. On the right side, we have the unsupported components, which are more limited. Data records, for instance, are not supported directly because they are part of the core data, not something you extend or customize. Standard object changes, like modifying built-in objects, aren't supported for customization through these tools. Users, meaning user setup and management, are also not supported here. Installed packages and some org-level settings fall into this unsupported category as well. The key takeaway is that while you have a lot of flexibility with custom objects, Apex, flows, and custom UI components, you need to be aware of the limitations around standard objects, user management, and certain org settings. This overview helps you understand what's possible within this platform and guides your customization strategy accordingly. All right, let's walk through the deployment flow. The first step is to create an outbound change set. This is where we gather all the components we want to move from our development environment to the target organization. It's like packaging everything up so nothing gets left behind. Next, we add components to the change set. This involves selecting the specific objects, fields, or configurations we need to deploy. It's important to be thorough here to ensure everything necessary is included. Once the change set is ready, we upload it to the target organization. This step transfers our package so it can be validated and deployed there. Validation is our next crucial step. Here, we check for any errors or issues that might prevent a smooth deployment. Think of it as a quality check, making sure everything is compatible and ready to go. Finally, after validation passes, we execute the deployment. This actually applies the changes to the target environment, completing the process. This deployment flow is fundamental to managing changes efficiently and safely across different environments. It ensures consistency and reduces the risk of errors during deployment. Let's talk about deployment connections. These are essential for sending change sets from one Salesforce org to another. But it's important to understand that you can't just create deployment connections between any orgs you want. Instead, you establish these connections between all orgs that are linked to a production org. For example, if you have a production org and two sandboxes, you'll create a deployment connection between the production org and each sandbox. Additionally, you'll also create a connection between the two sandboxes themselves. This setup ensures that your different environments can communicate effectively. However, having a deployment connection alone isn't enough. Each org must be explicitly authorized to send and receive change sets. This extra layer of security is crucial because it enforces proper code promotion paths and helps prevent accidental overwriting of setup metadata. So, in summary, deployment connections serve as the communication channels, but the authorization process is what really keeps your deployment process secure and well managed. This aligns with our overall goal of maintaining a controlled and reliable deployment environment. In this slide, I want to walk you through an example of a migration path for a production organization, which we'll call prod, and two sandboxes, dev and test. As you can see in the figure, the production org is set up to only receive changes that have been fully tested. That means only the test sandbox is authorized to upload change sets directly to production. This is a key point because it helps ensure stability and minimizes the risk of deploying untested or incomplete changes. Now, when it comes to synchronizing development projects with the production environment, the prod org can send change sets to the dev sandbox to update or share work-in-progress features. However, it cannot send change sets directly to the test sandbox. Instead, the test sandbox is meant to receive changes only from the production org or the dev sandbox to keep testing consistent. Finally, since development often involves iterative testing and refinement, dev and test sandboxes need to be able to send change sets back and forth to each other. This bidirectional movement allows developers to test new features, make adjustments, and ensure everything works smoothly before final deployment. Overall, this setup emphasizes controlled, tested deployments, with clear pathways for changes to move between development, testing, and production, aligning with best practices for managing change sets effectively. On this slide, we're focusing on understanding which organizations are authorized to upload changes to your current organization, and which organizations your org is allowed to update. This is crucial for managing deployment connections effectively. To see these available connections, you start by navigating to Setup, then entering Deployment in the Quick Find box. From there, select Deployment Settings. This is where all the configuration magic happens. Once you're there, you'll notice an option to click Edit next to the organization you want to either allow or restrict from sending change sets. This step is key because it lets you control who can push updates to your org or whom you can push updates to. In the list, you'll see the names of organizations that have deployment connections with your current org. Clicking on any of these names provides more details about that specific connection, like its description, type, and the direction of upload authorization. Speaking of that, the description gives a quick overview of the connected orgs, helping you understand their purpose or role. The type tells you what kind of org it is, whether it's a production environment, a full copy sandbox, a configuration-only sandbox, or a developer sandbox. Each has different use cases and permissions. Now, the upload authorization direction is particularly important. You'll see arrows indicating which way change sets can flow. A solid arrow means uploads are permitted in that direction, while a broken line indicates no change sets are authorized either way. If you want to allow the connected org to send inbound change sets, you'll need to edit the deployment connection accordingly. Conversely, if you want to send outbound change sets, the admin on the other org must make that change. Finally, to view all available deployment connections, remember to follow this process. It's a straightforward way to keep track of who can send or receive changes, ensuring your deployment process is secure and well managed. This control over deployment connections ties directly into our overall theme of managing changes efficiently and securely across your Salesforce environment. Now, let's talk about deployment connections. These are really useful because they allow us to copy customizations from one Salesforce org to another. The deployment connections list shows us which orgs are authorized to upload changes to this org, and conversely, which orgs allow this org to upload changes to them. To view the details of a connection, we start by going to Setup, then entering Deployment in the Quick Find box and selecting Deployment Settings. From there, we click on the name of the org we want to inspect. You'll notice a few key pieces of information here. First, the name of the org we're viewing. It's important to remember this isn't necessarily the org you're logged into, but the specific org you're examining. Then there's the description, which gives a brief overview of that org. Next, we see the type. This indicates what kind of org it is, whether it's a production, full, partial copy, developer pro, or just a developer org. Knowing the type helps us understand the purpose and capabilities of that org. There's also the Allow Inbound Changes option. If this is selected, it means that the named org can send change sets to your current org. Keep in mind, this is a read-only field and can only be modified by adjusting the setting in the target org itself. Finally, we have the Accepts Outbound Changes checkbox. When selected, it indicates that the named org allows change sets to be sent to it from your current org. Understanding these details helps us manage how customizations are shared and deployed across different Salesforce environments, which is crucial for maintaining consistency and control throughout our development and deployment processes. Next, let's talk about the authorization process required to upload changes. Before you can deploy a change set from one org to another, an administrator in the target org must give permission. This means they need to authorize uploads across the deployment connection between the two orgs. You'll see a deployment connections list that displays all the connections you have. This list is automatically populated with your production org and all sandboxes. While you can deploy between any of these orgs, keep in mind that deployment connections are not available for other orgs outside this list. It's also important to note that deployment connections are unavailable during maintenance periods. Since authorizing deployment connections and uploading pages require information from the production org, you won't be able to perform these actions when the org is under maintenance. However, during that time, you can still construct outbound change sets. You just can't upload them until maintenance is over. Another key point is that sandboxes must be available. If an org doesn't have any sandboxes provisioned, users might see an insufficient privileges error on the deployment connections page. Ensuring your sandboxes are available is crucial for smooth deployment processes. Also, remember that deployment doesn't automatically restart if errors occur. If you encounter an error during validation or deployment, you'll need to restart the process manually. Before doing that, double-check that your org isn't locked, under maintenance, or otherwise inaccessible. Finally, a few implementation tips. Always verify that your org and sandboxes are ready and accessible before starting deployment. Be mindful of maintenance windows, and if errors happen, don't hesitate to manually restart the process. Keeping these points in mind helps ensure smooth and efficient change set deployments. Deployment is a one-way transaction, which means once you initiate it, you can't undo it easily. When you deploy a change set, it happens in a single transaction. If anything goes wrong during the process, say there's an error or a missing component, the entire deployment is rolled back and nothing changes in your org. But once the deployment completes successfully, all the changes are committed, and at that point, you can't roll them back. It's also important to remember that deployments maintain user references. For example, if a component in your change set refers to a specific user, like someone receiving workflow email notifications or the user running a dashboard, the system tries to match that user in the destination org by comparing usernames. Now, when you copy data to a sandbox, the usernames from production are altered to include the sandbox name. So, for instance, user at acme.com in a sandbox named test becomes user at acme.com test. During deployment with change sets, the system ignores the sandbox suffix, meaning it still recognizes and transfers the user to other sandboxes or production orgs correctly. Finally, some best practices for implementing change sets include understanding that changes are committed atomically. That is, either everything deploys successfully or nothing does. Also, pay attention to user references and how they're handled across environments to avoid deployment issues. Connecting these points helps ensure smooth, reliable deployments aligned with your overall change management process. When opening a change set in Salesforce, you might notice it takes a few minutes to load, especially if your change set includes components with many dependencies. This delay happens because Salesforce needs to check all those dependencies before displaying the page. For example, a custom field that's part of a custom object with 2,500 dependent components can significantly slow down this process. Another important point is about action overrides. These are only pulled into a change set if they're associated with a custom object or app that's included in the set. So, if an action override is linked to a standard object, you won't be able to include it in your change set. This is a key limitation to keep in mind as you plan your deployment. Finally, a few tips for implementing change sets effectively. Always be aware of component dependencies, especially when working with complex or heavily customized setups. Understanding what can be included and what can't helps avoid surprises during deployment. And connecting these points back to our overall theme, managing dependencies efficiently is crucial for smooth and successful change set deployments in Salesforce. When preparing for org migration, it's important to create and manage change sets carefully. Salesforce sometimes performs org migrations from one instance to another, but keep in mind that Sandbox orgs change sets aren't automatically migrated. To preserve your metadata changes, you should upload your existing change sets from the Sandbox into either a production org or another Sandbox before the migration takes place. Next, ensure that you deploy all dependent components. This means every outbound change set must include all interdependent components that are needed in the target org. If you miss a component that another component depends on, the deployment will fail. Remember, change sets give you fine-grained control over what you deploy. For example, if you're migrating custom fields, you can choose to migrate them individually or together with their parent custom object. Just adding the custom object alone won't cause an error, but it will result in an empty object without its fields, which isn't usually what you want. Adding permissions and access settings is also crucial. By including profiles or permission sets in your outbound change sets, you can ensure that users will have the right access to new functionality after deployment. Keep in mind that permission sets and profile settings behave differently within change sets, so understanding that distinction helps avoid confusion. If you need to add dependent components after you've already uploaded a change set, cloning is your best option. Once a change set is uploaded, you can't modify its contents directly. So you clone it, add the necessary components, and then upload the new version. Finally, following best practices during this process is key. Always double-check that all dependencies are included, and use cloning to manage changes efficiently. These steps help ensure your migration is smooth, and that the new environment functions as expected, which ultimately supports the overall goal of maintaining a clean, well-managed org. Let's talk about validating change sets before deployment. You can perform a test deployment of an inbound change set to see what success or failure messages might appear during an actual deployment. This is especially useful if you're planning to deploy during low-use hours and want to ensure everything will go smoothly ahead of time. Keep in mind, though, that you don't need to do this every time, because the process does take some time and locks the org for its duration. During this lock, you can still read and write data, but you can't make any setup changes that would modify the metadata. To test deploy an inbound change set, simply click on its name and then click Validate. Now, if you want to view the details of a component, you can do so by looking at its XML representation. You can view this after uploading an outbound change set or before deploying an inbound one. It's a helpful way to verify exactly what components are included. There's also a limit to be aware of. Change sets are capped at 10,000 files. If your change set exceeds this, you should consider creating separate change sets for email templates, dashboards, and reports. These components tend to be the most numerous and typically have fewer dependencies, making them easier to split up. And a quick note on deleting or renaming components. Change sets can't handle these actions. To delete components, you'll need to use the web interface on the target org. To rename a component, first delete the existing one on the target org, then upload the new component in a change set. Finally, let's touch on some best practices. Validating change sets helps catch issues early, saving time and avoiding deployment failures. Limiting the size of change sets keeps the process manageable and reduces potential errors. Remember, change sets are a powerful tool, but knowing when and how to use them effectively is key to smooth deployments. When working with page layouts, it's important to use distinct names for global publisher layouts and Outlook publisher layouts. When you add page layouts to an outbound change set, the type for these layouts isn't displayed, which can cause confusion. So, to keep things clear, always give them unique names. This way, you'll be able to easily differentiate between them when reviewing your change sets. Next, let's talk about planning your deployments around your maintenance schedule. It's crucial to coordinate your deployment activities with the maintenance windows of both your production and Sandbox environments. Some features might need data from your production org when accessed from a Sandbox, so timing matters. Also, keep in mind that when you validate an outbound change set, the originating org gets locked, and during deployment of an inbound change set, the target org is locked. While you can still read and write data during these times, you won't be able to make setup changes that alter the metadata. Another point to consider is deployment delays when your change set includes changes to custom field types. These changes can sometimes extend deployment times significantly because they might require updates across many records. To avoid long delays, a good strategy is to manually apply those field type changes after the main change set has been deployed. Finally, remember to plan for tests when deploying to your target org. If you're deploying to a production environment, all local Apex tests are automatically run. However, if you're deploying to a Sandbox, tests aren't run automatically, so you'll need to trigger them manually if necessary. Keeping these testing considerations in mind helps ensure a smooth and reliable deployment process. By following these best practices, you'll improve the clarity, efficiency, and success of your change set deployments. So let's talk about some of the key limitations we're facing with this traditional approach. First off, no version control. That means we don't have a way to track changes over time or revert to previous versions if something goes wrong. It really makes managing updates much more challenging. Next, no rollback capability. If a deployment causes issues, we're stuck without an easy way to undo the changes quickly, which can lead to longer downtime and more frustration. Then there's the manual process. Everything requires human intervention, which not only increases the chance of errors, but also slows down our deployment cycle. It's less efficient and more prone to mistakes. This approach is also not friendly for CI/CD practices, continuous integration, and continuous deployment. Without automation and version control, integrating new code smoothly and deploying rapidly become difficult, if not impossible. All these points highlight some clear limitations. They showcase why moving towards more automated, integrated solutions is essential for modern development and operational efficiency. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I really appreciate you being here and engaging with the content. I hope the key points we've discussed have provided you with valuable insights and practical ideas to take away. Remember, the concepts we explored are all interconnected and meant to help you make meaningful progress in your projects. If you have any questions or want to dive deeper into any topic, please feel free to reach out. Once again, thank you for your participation, and I look forward to seeing how you apply what you've learned.